Are you two excited about this Athletes Unlimited thing? Is it gonna be pretty cool?
I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it goes. I think
All
I'm
right.
more curious than
Not a
excited. I
lot
think
of
it's a combination. So
Yeah,
it's, I
I
mean,
this for a little bit in Tucson when I saw her, and she was pretty jazzed about it all. It seems like
yeah,
neat idea
right.
at least.
it's
I'm
gonna be,
gonna throw
I'm
this
curious.
on broadcast. So
Okay.
now should be letting people in. There we go.
Cool. I have the Q&A pulled up on my screen.
Awesome. Okay,
So,
now we are on
After we
YouTube.
can't see you, bro. There we go. That's better.
All right.
I hate
Awesome.
this fan. It makes my, it's like I've,
A little bright.
All right, we'll hop over to this guy. And we'll do this. Cool.
Sweet.
All right, looks like we're rolling.
All right.
All right, cool. So I think people are still signing on. Do you guys want to wait a couple more minutes while people keep filtering in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No rush. Give them a minute.
Yeah, maybe a minute or two while people keep signing
Only
on.
technology. If this is real life, then we run in laps or something. Probably. I don't know. Doc probably has all sorts of things up her sleeve that she could punish everyone with.
Yeah, spoken like a true coach.
Sash doing those Orange Theory workouts. She's got all the tricks now.
No. No.
You still cycling, dude? You used to do that, right?
Yeah. Well, we have the Peloton bike. So I do that like every day, but today I got on the treadmill. I have like PTSD from like running and treadmills from college. So I try to not do that as much, but I challenged myself today and I got on that bad boy and I killed it.
Awesome.
My husband and I rode our bikes over to the middle school down the street last night and took basketball and shot around. I was terrible. I was so bad. I lost at Pig twice. I was bad. It was really bad. Really mad. Oh,
I wish I was there seeing you compete though. Like that is
God.
gold right there.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, should we do it? Kick this thing off?
Yeah, people can join.
All right, let's do it. So everybody that's on already, thank you so much for tuning in. We're super excited to be bringing you this conversation. My name's Elena. I'm the head of Fast Pitch for Hit Tracks. We have some awesome panelists and some just awesome content to bring you today. We're really excited. We're going to kick it off. We'll definitely be diving into some data, a lot of different topics, but I want to hop this over to Maggie, who organized and brought everybody to the table. Go ahead and switch over to her bio. So Maggie Huffaker is the head coach of Boise State. She took over the program in 2019. Some crazy stats over there, but to give you a rundown, for the first time in program history, they finished ranked 35th in the nation in the end of 2019. Went on to win their first conference game, right, coach? Tournament game in program history. And if you look at the pedigree there, she did the same thing at University of Utah, UNLV, just awesome coaching career. And she will be moderating the conversation today. So Maggie, want to take it over?
Yeah, awesome. Elena, first of all, thank you. This is really fun how this has kind of come about, because as we're all in this corona crisis, it's been really weird for everyone. And I've seen a lot of people throwing out information and sharing, and that's fantastic. And for me, if I could coach only catchers, it would be like a dream come true. And unfortunately, there's a whole lot more to the game, but that's a lot of fun as well. But the passion that I have for catching is pretty large. And so, there's been a few people along the way that I've met that share that same kind of passion. And it's always fun when you get in the same room with those people. And so last week I was like, you know what, let's get some catcher people talking, and why not grab a couple of people that are on the forefront of the game right now, getting prepared for the Olympics in 2021, that I've gotten to know a little bit through the years. And so I was like, man, I'll ask some questions and let's talk to some people that are playing the game at a really, really high level. And so that's how this kind of came about. These young women that we have talking with us tonight, you know, Sash, I got to know probably by the time she was 16, 17 years old. I recruited her and the punk decided to go to ASU instead of Utah, but whatever. We got best friend. We'll look into that. Pretty cool. That led to knowing Chitty. Chitty's amazing. And I don't know Chitty all that well yet, but we've had some talks a little bit just back and forth about catching here and there. And I love the passion that she has for the game. And Rafter, I've known, gosh, since when you were transferring from Detroit Mercy and getting ready to play Canada from the first go round, you know. So Sash is the starting catcher for Team Mexico, Chitty catching for United States, and Rafter catching for Team Canada for years now. All of these young women have amazing collegiate careers that they've been a part of and have coached as well. Some, you know, some big time college programs that they've been a part of already. And so it goes without saying the knowledge that they bring based on both where they've been and where they are now. And we'll kind of just dive right into it. What we have prepared is just some question and answers. And we'll bring up, you know, I'll ask basically a direct question to one and then open it up a little bit. And then those of you that are on the chat, you can also shoot a question to me via text in the Zoom chat. And I can throw in some questions from the audience as well. Okay, so we're gonna start out with a question for Rafter. Rafter currently, like I said, playing for Team Canada, has been for a long time, finished her career at Florida State and did some coaching, was at Virginia most recently coaching until she kind of was dedicating herself to the Olympics. Now specifically doing that for one last go at an Olympic medal. Okay, so first question, we're going to get into it. And I know this is something that is big for Rafter. Rafter is a tall individual, and she and I both have learned along the same lines over the years, some different techniques and some things that matter a lot. And we talk a lot about setup. So I wanted to ask her about setup and why is it important for your pitcher? Why is it important for your health? What have you learned about in your health in regards to your setup? And how has it affected your ability to receive properly?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, again, thanks for having us. I mean, it's crazy that Maggie put this together in a little less than a week. So big thanks to you, first of all, but I think dive right into it. I mean, to me, the setup in the stance, it's the foundation of everything we're going to do as a catcher. It's going to directly impact how our ability to block, our ability to throw, our ability to field bunts, and most importantly, our ability to receive the ball. So I was trying to think of a way to kind of allow you guys to visually understand this. And what I kind of came up with is we want to do everything as catchers like we have weight on our back. So kind of go to what I see a lot in catcher squats. So just that first few pictures, Elena. So this is what I see a lot with catchers. We have a lot of toe strikers. So people whose toes, we're on our toes. We have a narrow base. Our hips and our knee angles are a little bit off. So we're turning a little bit with our upper body. We don't have great upper body posture. So you see that first picture on the left, and I honestly just grabbed these offline last night. So just upper back posture, and then just a lot of turning. So if I had weight on my back in this position, you kind of see how we're putting some funky forces on some different areas. And the reason why this is important for us as catchers is when we can squat, if we think about the squat position, when we have weight on our back, like a weightlifter, we're loading actually our big muscle groups, our glutes, our quads, our hamstrings. The moment we start to turn and rotate, maybe our hips, our shoulders, our knees, now we start putting a lot of strain on our ligaments and our joints and all those smaller muscle groups that we want to use for stabilization. So going into the next slide, this is kind of how, notice a difference in these weightlifters. I kind of got a few in their catch positions. So kind of see the difference in the actual setup. So this is kind of an ideal squat position, what I think of as an ideal squat position. Good, notice heels are on the ground, good depth. Their depths are a little bit different. So the girl on the right, she's not as low as the guy on the left, but so you can alter your depth, but they're pretty square. Their knees, their hips, and their shoulders are pretty square. So when we think about receiving, our goal is not to snatch or catch the ball with our fingers. My goal as a catcher is always, we're trying to stop movement by moving our glove and actually stop movement with our body position. So if our body position isn't good and isn't strong, it's really hard to start stopping movement. And what happens is we kind of break these levers, and you'll see we end up kind of, I call it finger catching, which means we're just actually like snatching pitches and catching with our fingertips, which isn't the strongest of our muscle groups. We know we want to try to catch with our shoulder and our our base that we've created. So if you throw to video 1 there, Lane, I'll just kind of show you guys an example of this. Biggest thing in this video to pay attention to, this is just kind of me messing around down in Florida, just at Pro Swings. Just notice how square, one, getting in a good base, and how square the hips and the knees are staying. So as we kind of roll through that, it's just a curveball. It's a pretty good curveball, but we're kind of throwing, it's a little bit grainy, but just kind of notice how square everything's staying. Everything's really quiet, and I'm not catching the ball with my fingertips. We're actually just catching the ball with our shoulder. Our shoulder's moving it to a spot and the glove's closing it. I think it's a really good target for pitchers as we go to the next one. It presents a big target for your pitcher. So you kind of see just getting in a stance here, nice wide stance, good hip flexion, and then letting the ball close your mitt and letting your base catch movement instead of trying to catch movement with your fingertips. So that's kind of the big takeaway. But in mentality, whatever we do, whether it's throwing, think about in mentality, would I want to do this with 100 pounds on my back? Would this make sense? Could I still do this movement? And if you couldn't, then maybe we can do things a little bit more efficiently or stack that weight. And just over time, I think it's been huge for me to learn this, just because over time it's helped just save my joints as much as I can, and allowed me to kind of keep at this level for this period of time.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So, because you didn't really, like, in those videos, like, you weren't really moving much. So are you getting, like, what pitch you're going to call? So are you getting yourself set over a little bit more in that position so you don't have to move?
Yeah, so we kind of have like 2 different stances we'll talk about. Like, so signal stance, you're a little more narrow, you're giving the signal, and then we're shifting to receiving stance. So good question. So you're kind of shifting your center mass to wherever you want to go, probably like closer to the outer edges of the plate once you give the signal, once you go. So I'm kind of a little more middle there. And then once she goes to throw the pitch, that little bit of a split shift. So you can kind of step out, or we call it a split shift, for just spreading your feet apart to get a little bit wider down into that base. And for some of you guys, I will mention too, like, some people don't have great knee flexibility and hip flexibility, which is okay. Like, some of you guys might be, I know, Chitty, you're a little bit more on your toes. Like, Sashel, you're like, your butt goes down on the ground and you have like the most amazing hip flexibility ever. Like, that's okay. It's more just making sure, if you can't, can we keep our shoulders and our shoulders and our hips, our knees all in line? So there are some different variations of how flexible your hips are, which are completely fine, but more kind of the angles and paying attention to that.
Yeah. I struggle with my ankles. Like, that's where I struggle with a lot, is that my ankles won't flex to get me into that position sometimes. So it's tough.
And a lot of that comes from the repetition of our entire life, where we did it probably incorrectly. If you were me, my generation, we squatted on our toes because that's what we were told to do. And so you've put yourself in a poor position over time, so you may have some mobility issues as it is, and then you trained it improperly, that now you're trying to deal with it, later on in life. And if we can prevent that from an early age and do some assessments early on with our mobility, we can definitely prevent some of that long term.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next question. That's fantastic start, Rafter. Appreciate the videos and all that too. Again, if people want to throw out questions, I'm seeing some questions. I can type some answers to some of you. And then if a question comes up that we can ask the whole group, I'll throw that out there too. So we'll move on to a question for Sash here. Again, Sash, just Sashel Palacios, catcher for Team Canada, played at ASU. The life of the party, big time leader behind the plate. So Sash is an energetic one. If you ever get to the chance to watch her play, don't worry about the size, right? Watch what she's doing, right? Watch the output. She's always putting the product on the field. So anyways, Sash, over time, and this question is about, how have you evolved in your receiving approach? I know for you were taught by your dad, baseball guy, Kiko, okay? Then you go and you end up playing through some good travel ball organizations. Then you play at ASU, and now you're catching at the national level. You're dealing with some big time arms. How has receiving changed for you over time, and how you've managed pitchers with elite pitchers, and then playing against elite competition where the game is sped up? You guys always talk about the international game being so much faster, and how your receiving maybe had to adjust based on that.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think the fact that I get to speak about catching and play against these two greats, like, I think that that's awesome. And I've met a lot of my goals, you know what I mean? But I definitely think that just evolving, I don't really think early in college, I spent a lot of time practicing the catching aspect. It was always just like I would go out there and do it other than, bullpens. But I think my senior year, Coach Ford, Trisha Ford at ASU, she really spent time trying to give me drills and everyday little snippets of stuff that I could get better at. And I think that from then on, it was kind of finding my stance and also being more quiet behind the plate. I think that, young kids, they're taught to be, push the ball back to the plate and make every pitch look like a strike. And Coach Ford really said something that stuck with me was not, you have to make the strikes look like strikes. And if it's a ball, it's a ball. And I think that that really simplified the game for me. I think, as catchers, we have so much already on our plate, literally. Oh, that didn't, but we have already so much to deal with behind the plate. And I think that, being able to just slow the game down and understand that, obviously the higher level of pitching, they know, and I know where the ball is going to go or where it's going to miss. And so I definitely think from, younger in college, I was stressing back there trying to make everything look like a strike, whereas now it's kind of like second nature. And I think that that comes with repetitions. I think that comes with just feeling confident behind the plate. But I'm working a lot harder on just being more quiet, but still maintaining that confidence and that swagger when you're receiving. I think that you kind of have to make it your own. I've watched film, and as you evolve and you get into higher level of play, you have to change what you're doing sometimes so that, tendencies are not picked. Like if I do a certain thing with my leg or my glove for a certain pitch, these players on the national teams will pick up on stuff like that, and they'll communicate that with their teammates. And so I think that constantly watching film of myself, but also of other greats that are doing it, I think really helps. And just a matter of kind of owning behind the plate, I think has been really big for me. I'm a knee dropper, so I drop my knee a lot, which allows me to get underneath the ball. In college, early on, I couldn't really grasp the idea of my thumb being underneath the ball when I caught. And I think that probably led me to being a finger catcher, catching with my fingers. But now with my knee dropping, I feel like I'm able to get underneath more pitches. Obviously with Danielle O'Toole, who's predominantly drop ball, that is more beneficial than when I'm catching Dallas, who's a nut ball pitcher. And so I just think that constantly learning from other people and kind of being aware of tendencies and how I could be better for each pitcher. And I think that that has really been what I've changed. And I've grown so much confident wise behind the plate. I feel invincible back there. And I think that it just comes from that repetition, really, and watching yourself do what you do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love, so the keys, it sounds like you got quieter, right? You didn't try to make strike or ball strikes. And I think it's a big tendency we see across the board, just trying to do too much. And it's an insult. It's an insult to pitchers, to umpires, to hitters, to everybody when we're dragging balls and pulling them outside of the strike zone back towards the plate, and so I think you realize that more later on, and that's good points that you bring up, Sash. That's fantastic. Anybody else want to chime in on how maybe receiving has evolved? Rafter or Chitty, either of you guys?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think, to exactly kind of what Sash talked about is the kind of one of the things that I picked up kind of talking to some major league guys, the true measure of a catcher is not how many balls you get called strikes. The true measure of catcher is how many strikes or how many times you don't get strikes called balls. So don't worry about getting all these balls and turning them into strikes. What we need to be really, really, really good at is making sure every strike that's thrown from our pitcher gets called a strike. And I think that's definitely something that's changed. And it used to be, I will be the first one to tell you, back when I played against Chitty, I can tell you that game we played here, it was like you could get chalk line to chalk line in the first pitch. Like it used to be white line to white line. Here we go ahead pitchers and go. And now it's shrunk a ton, and it's shrinking a ton in the lower levels. So I think that's going to be a really important adjustment. Just people I don't need to go out and try to go in. It's really, can you grow your play through as the game progresses?
That's a great point.
Awesome. All right, that's fantastic. Let's move on. We'll go to the next one here. Chitty, Amanda Chidester with Team USA. Slow introductions here, right? So now we're highlighting her. You play at the University of Michigan, All-American, all of the above, everything you could possibly gain, I think, as an award. Been a standout player in the NPF, and also kind of has been with the USA program for quite a while now, right? Over how many years now, Chitty?
I don't know. I think like 7. I think it is something like that. 7, 8.
So in softball,
2012.
like 180. That's like
Yeah. Oof, it's been a minute.
Has caught for, amazing pitchers over her career, has continued to evolve. If you follow Chitty on any social media, she's probably the hardest working, no offense to you other two that are here, but Chitty, and I know that she's been trying to improve her catching game over the years. And so it's fantastic to see her at this point, which is awesome. So Chitty, the question with you, and this again, we can open this up to everybody, but blocking versus picking, there's debate there a lot of times if coaches want their players to block or not, or pick, and when do you use those skills? Are those things that you predominantly use, or does the pitch tell you what to do with it? What's your mindset on blocking and picking?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And when you gave us these questions, I was kind of happy I got this one because, like as Rafter was talking about setup and, the way I look back there compared to the way Rafter looks and Sash look is completely different, especially me a few years ago compared to me now. Like my mobility and flexibility in my hips and my ankles and all of that, it was lacking big time. And, as to like what Coach Mags was saying, like I'm always a student of the game, always constantly wanting to learn and constantly get better. And I mean, even now, like I'm learning from Sash and Rafter. So this is great conversation for me because, for me as being a utility player, I lack a lot of game experience. And that's been tough for me as a catcher because I think that that's valuable. It's valuable information when you can catch in a game. So, for me, for blocking and, picking, for me back in the day, it was really hard for me to block. And I remember getting yelled at all the time. You got to get down and block. You got to get down and block. And it wasn't until I was older when I was told, well, why don't you just start picking it? And I was like, well, can I do that? Like, is that a thing? Like, I really can pick it. And, after going through it was just like, wow, like if there's a runner on first and there's a ball in the dirt and I'm able to pick it, I can stay up and through it on my feet and be able to throw a runner out versus it's in the dirt, get down, block it, try to get back up and then throw the person out. So understanding, the different situations of when to pick versus block is important. And it's just as important to practice blocking as it is to picking. So, both of them, you're going to need to practice a lot of both because like what Coach Mags was saying, or asked the question of, does it depend on the pitch? Does it depend on the situation? Well, honestly, it depends on both, right? So if there's a runner on first and it's a ball where it's easy to pick and come through, which you'll start once you realize who your pitchers are and how they throw their balls in the dirt, you'll know if you can pick it or not. And most of the times you'll be able to come right through it. So runner on first, I'm picking like 9 times out of 10. I'm not going to get down and block that ball. Like I'm going to go
unless Rafter's on first.
Rafter's
on first, you can block.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, that still depends. Maybe you get a big lead. Maybe you're getting kind of like, woo, maybe I'm going to go on Chitty. And then if I pick it, I can back throw you. Right. So it depends on that situation as well. But always rule of thumb, if there is a runner on third, I am always blocking the ball. I need to keep that ball in. I mean, if it's blocking it off my arm, whatever it is, like I need to keep that ball in front of me at all times. So I feel like that is like kind of like the main thing, like, runner on third, like I need to keep the ball in front of me. So I got to get down, use my whole body, get down, block it, whatever it is. But sometimes too, it depends if you're late in the game, there's a runner on second, am I going to risk it to try picking it or block it and keep it in front? Because, a lot of times it depends on the runner too, right? Because if it's a quick runner, then you really don't have a chance if you're going to get down and block it. But if it's someone who's maybe medium speed, like I could, potentially have shot. So the game is filled with, and as a catcher too, there's just so many layers to situations, who's on base, what pitcher's pitching. And so I think you really have to understand your arm strength. You have to understand your abilities of scooping the ball, picking the ball, and blocking the ball. You have to understand base runners and how fast they are. So I think there's definitely different layers. But if I had to do an overview rule of thumb, runner on third, I'm always blocking. Runner on first, I'm going to be scooping, so I can either do a back pick or throw her out at second.
Mhm.
I was like,
darn it. Sorry.
Moderator's on mute.
Good stuff. What do you guys got?
I think she's spot on with that. I mean, growing up, Kiko, my dad was always like, you block everything. And I'd go out there, with, chest protector on, and that's all I do is block, block, block. But I think that now that the game, again, is evolving, this past summer, we played against the USSSA Pride, and they're really aggressive on the bases, and they have speed. And so any ball that they saw down, they were going. And so during that game, instead of blocking, I had to pick. I had no choice but to pick, other than a runner at third base. But I think catchers were really unique because we have to be thinking about all this: the speed of the runner, the game situation, the aggressiveness of the runners. And so I think that it kind of just depends on the game and where you're at. Like Chitty said, I think she nailed that.
But I think too, just adding on to that, like how you said your dad was always like, you gotta block, catchers. Blocking is not easy. Like, you're literally telling yourself to drop down and get smoked by a ball. Like, it's hard. So you have to, for me, I had to ease into it. Like, my skills with catching, I had to practice them way more as I got older, because I didn't really catch in college. So it's like, as I got older, and I'm thinking to myself, like, God, I'm throwing these balls to these little kids, and then I don't even want to block in front of them, right? So it's just like, ease into it with like just getting your body used to dropping down and doing it, getting used to scooping through a ball. Like, it takes repetition and practice to gain that confidence. So like what Sash said, in a game where a team is being aggressive when the ball is down, you're like, oh, I already practiced this, let's go,
Mm-hmm.
Rafter, I remember you talking about when you played in Japan, just that the runners were so incredibly aggressive and fast, and like you really had no chance. You almost had to like not only pick, but anticipate them going so much that you were like picking and running forward almost as you receive the ball. So I think the higher level, like, it just doesn't allow for the block and recover.
Yeah, like I think even in college now, if in international, if you get like medium speed, if they read that ball in the dirt and go, you have no shot to block. So why not take your chances and maybe pick it? Because if you block, you could have a perfect kill block come up, like ready to fire, dead on throw, and you're not going to get them. So
absolutely,
at that point, just take your chance on the pick and go. It's just, there's not enough time. Like, there's not enough time, and especially even in the college level now, people are running a lot. So just ball in the dirt, people are gone. So I think picking is definitely the next wave of things that we'll have to kind of shore up behind there.
And honestly too, like, I remember some of the first things I did when I started at UNLV playing for Lonnie, who's at Florida State now. Everybody did short hops. Everybody went through the footwork like you were an infielder. I was like, what am I doing? I'm a catcher, in my head. Of course I didn't say that. Coach Vic would have killed me, but like, that made me so much better, and I think you can do it from your feet, you can do it from your knees, whatever, but you have to work on those things. Mm-hmm. And then we advance it to the next level where, we're using the hack attack and we're pounding it at you to work on picking, right, and improving the game. But from a very young level, don't just like pigeonhole your catchers and have them catch the ball and toss it to your coach, or just throw them over the bullpen and, fend for yourselves, right? We can get better at these things. And I think it's really important. I think it's neglected a lot, and it's not that hard to just incorporate them into a lot of the things that you do. Make them athletic,
Mm-hmm.
I also think that catchers can take a little bit more advantage of those bullpen sessions. Like, if they have nobody that's designated to work with them, I think that, let their pitchers know, hey, I'm not going to do it everyone, but don't be alarmed if I come up like I'm ready to throw, or I pick a ball, or I block a ball. That's your time to get better. And I really think that will help you see more balls and distinguish between, should I block or should I pick?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a good point.
Awesome. All right. So we'll move on back to Rafter now. And this one's going to be a two-part question here with Elena as well. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the data that's out there a little bit, and kind of some measurables. So as a coach, I know for me, when we go out and recruit, and we look for the next catcher that we want, you know, what am I looking for? And maybe Rafter, you have coached as well and recruited as well. And then as you've now evolved in your own catching, what are the things that are most important? Is it for throwing people out? Because at the end of the day, right, catchers, we want somebody that can receive and somebody that can throw, you know? So what's most important? Is it exchange? Is it accuracy? Is it arm strength? You know, and what are the measurables? What can we do as coaches, and what data is out there can help us to actually evolve this a little bit?
Yeah, so I think for me, as a coach, when I was coaching, you can't really teach arm strength. Like, even if you spent and you invested a whole lot of time in arm strength, you're not teaching arm strength that well. So what I want to, if arm strength is there, then great. I can usually make them throw faster, because where it comes down to for us, and I think at any level, is how quickly you can get rid of the ball is 100%. Now, there's two parts to it. There's how as fast as possible, but I also have to deliver the ball over second base consistently. So we have this like efficiency piece, but we also have we have to have a clean throwing sequence. And all the throwing sequences is like, can you consistently translate energy from the ground through your torso and up through your shoulder and through your fingertips? If you have finger speed or hand speed, like, you're going to be able to throw the ball well as you can, based on like what your natural like gifts are as a thrower. So you can take people who aren't gifted throwers speed wise, but make them gifted in the sense that you can repeat the pattern over and over again well, and that's going to maximize their pop time from home to first. Just have a feel like, in terms of the efficiency piece, I have a video. We'll see if it plays, Elena, just that like third video, just in the sense like what I'm talking about, efficiency. And this is throwing from your knee. I honestly think there's been a few questions. I think throwing from your knee, if you can sequence properly, I've had 10-year-olds that can throw from their knees and make it down to second. It's not hard, but it's a clean sequence, and they're able to throw and actually get the ball down to second base. So it's more about getting the ball out of your mitt as fast as possible. That's going to be a little bit choppy, but I think just like in the sense, like, we want to get it out of our mitt as fast as possible. And then we're trying to like send power up. So the two absolutes that we have is when the front foot hits or the front knee hits, you have to be delivering the ball. And then the second one is we have to release the ball out front of our front foot. So you see all of these throws that are good throws on the money, like we're releasing the ball out front. Where I think we run into a ton of problems with catchers is we see kids, the first thing we want to do is put our knee down. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing we want to do is we want to gear up and try to throw with our arm as fast as we can. Like, we're not really throwing with our arm and using our arm strength. We're trying to like create torque and tension all the way through, up through our body and out through our fingers. So it's more about the sequence than it is about the arm strength, but training that does take some time. So I think kind of one of the big keys, tricks to training it, is to try to get the ball out of your mitt as fast as possible. Just get separation in your hands as soon as you can. And then the second part would just be practice spins, because how well you can catch spins. Everyone loves to practice like throwing front toss to throw down. I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent here, but everyone just likes to like toss a ball and throw it down. But catching a drop ball down and in is a really, really different sequence than catching someone tossing you a front toss pitch. So work on catching and throwdowns off of different pitches in different locations. And that's where I'm actually really excited to work with Elena as we go forward here, just understanding how that affects the data, because how can we clean up those different areas of catching? I'll kind of segue into Elena, just what they're doing and how they're doing it, and kind of seeing where the big holes are in our actual transition of our throw.
Perfect. So let's follow up with Elena. Like, what are you seeing number wise?
Yeah, what's awesome is everything that Rafter just said is pretty supported by the data. So the graph to the left, it's pretty self-explanatory and pretty common sense, actually. So to give you a little bit of background, this was collected over 6 months with high school catchers by an organization called Protect the Plate. Joe Clare, a little shout out. She's been awesome, and she's been really great in putting this stuff together into ways that really make sense, and stuff that we can use practically in the game. But what you see to the left is throw time. So this is after the ball's been released. So the amount of time that after the ball is released to the time that it gets to second base. And then below, you have the throwing velocity. So for every 5.3 miles per hour that you increase your throwing velocity, the throw time is going to come down by about 0.2. But that 5.3 mile per hour increases are pretty significant, right? So if we look at the data, what we're going to find is that you can get, you can have a great exchange time and a decent pop time. So if you can get your exchange time down to about 0.7, right? And your throw time under, what I meant to say is if your exchange time is low and your throwing velocity is mediocre, right? You're only going to get your pop time so low. Does that make sense? So if you're looking at the collegiate level, about 2.7 seconds first to second, speedy runners, right? The elite level. So if you're at that Olympic exchange time in and out of your hand, but you're only releasing the ball at 55 miles per hour or a little bit under that out of the chute, you're never going to get a 2.7. Doesn't matter how consistent your exchange is. You have to have the throwing velocity. So that's what's really going to differentiate the good pop times from the great pop times, is it has to be a combination of both. So that's pretty cool, you can still give you the confidence to know that you can still have a good pop time with a decent exchange and some decent throwing velocity. But if you want to be at that elite level, getting the 2.7 runners, you're going to have some throwing velocity in there.
Yeah, I think it's so great to have the data to back it up. And I know that we're only on like the tip of the iceberg with what you guys do with HitTrax and being able to have like the concrete measurables. But I know for me, I used to really preach exchange, like transfer, right? Get in and out. So people that are listening that don't know what we mean by exchange, we're talking about when the ball hits the glove to the time the ball leaves the hand. That's what we talk about with exchange, your exchange number, right? You want that number to be really, really low, and it used to be kind of bring it up here and bring it back, right? And now we're trying to get it out, get rid of it, okay? But if you do not have the arm strength to back it up at our level, at collegiate level and beyond, it just doesn't play, So I've realized now that I need to recruit the arm strength, and I can hopefully teach the transfer, right? And you saw some of the drills that Rafter was doing, right? She just, boom, grab it, get rid of it, There's a lot that you can do to improve your transfer, but it's going to be a little more difficult to increase your throwing velocity. That's just life, right? I know personally I wasn't gifted with a big arm. I got rid of it okay, but I think that's probably the reason I wasn't elite, right? Like I wasn't playing at the next level beyond where I was for a reason. And that's okay. Do the best with what you have. But I guess just understanding what you need to be that elite level. Elena, any more on the numbers or what you guys are doing with HitTrax with that? I don't think that HitTrax has the catching module. Some people don't, because the name is HitTrax.
HitTrax.
The catching module is fantastic with HitTrax.
Yeah, exactly that. So actually, because a lot of people aren't as familiar with it, I just have a quick example of what it looks like pulled up. So
as you grab that, can I ask Maggie, what do you, I know I try to get like 0.6 to me is like elite. If you can get into talking exchange times,
yeah.
0.60. What are your kind of ranges?
Sorry, go ahead.
Like, what are your range? What ranges do you look at? Like, can call it like 0.8 to 1? Like, what would be an elite, maybe for people, what would be an elite exchange time? Maybe you're going to answer that, Elena.
No, that's an awesome question. So that elite is right going to be between that 0.6, 0.7. The MLB range is right around there. Average MLB range, to your point earlier, Rafter, about just challenging people realistically as you would in a game. Average in game is right around 0.85 in the MLB. So you'll see the lower, on really great exchanges, but things speed up in a game. Pitches move differently. You're, like you guys said, you're picking something differently, right? So how can we get really creative in how we challenge ourselves to train, to be as realistic and cut that exchange time, cut that pop time down so we're consistent with it in games. But if you can hover in that 0.6 to 0.7 range, and you're going to have your throwing velocity right around 60 miles per hour, you're going to be in that like 1.6 pop time range. So if you look at, so just to work backwards here, because I've been reading a ton about this. I mean, I'm actually getting a little obsessed now, but you look at pitch time of a 65 mile per hour pitch, about 0.45 seconds, right? So at your levels, it's probably going to be a little bit shorter than that, but you add a little bit of time for pitch time, so the runner's getting a good jump, and you add some time for the tag, which we were just talking about as a group yesterday. So if you add about a full second between the time that the pitch is delivered, the time the tag is made, if your pop time is 1.6, now you're looking at 2.6 by the time the play is made in full. So then you can compare that against the fastest runner on the other team and start contrasting. Am I going to get her out on her best jump? You know, kind of work backwards from there.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny, you know, you talk about these things, and I think a lot of people don't even think about these things, right? We've got infatuated with pop time, you know, and unfortunately, I think it's really funny, like pop time's cheated all the time when you see it in reps, right? You see it in between innings or whatever, and you know, they're standing like on top of the plate sometimes, you know, and it's like, oh, there's my pop time. Well, you cut the distance a little bit and you're jumping out in front, you know what I mean? So let's see it in real time, what it actually is, and what do we really need to get to be consistently throwing out those elite runners. You know, we use Coach's Eye, the app on the phone, where you can video and then slow it down, and you can tap, you know, you can tap a little stopwatch on there. You have to pay for that function, I think. You can tap the stopwatch, and you can have your exchange, your pop time, and everything there. If you don't have a hit tracks, the hit tracks, you can measure it. You can do it with a stopwatch yourself. It's difficult. It's not that easy to do, right? But I do think even the idea of it, some of our players in the past, they never even thought about measuring the exchange, right? So even the idea of throwing that out to your players, I think they'll improve by focusing on it some. Okay. I think, again, we could probably go on some of these topics forever, but we'll probably move on. Just to throw this out there too, I'm seeing a lot of questions, people asking for drills, you know, and unfortunately, I don't think we have a ton of opportunity with what we were doing tonight to throw a ton of drills in there. I mean, you'll see a couple things here and there. This has been more of a discussion, but you know, maybe we can throw some drills together and put them out there somewhere for you guys. I don't know, but we'll work on that. So, and it's hard to obviously verbally talk through drills, but we'll see what we can do to try to help you guys out with some of that kind of stuff.
Can I add a little tip in there for them when practicing that stuff? So something for me that I've had a hard time transferring, because like you were saying, like, you know, you get a ton of reps in practice just throwing it down and you get this certain time, but come game time, it's like totally different. And so as like, you know, a higher like level athlete who doesn't have practice like with a team, like how do you kind of simulate a game like type atmosphere to make it as realistic as possible? And one thing that I've found that has helped me, that I'm still kind of working on, is the visual aspect, right? So when we're just in practice getting reps, like we're just staring at the pitcher, staring at the ball and just throwing it down. But that is so unrealistic come game time, because there's a visual piece of seeing a runner go, being able to get it and then going. So, you know, when you're practicing those transition times, instead of just staring right at the ball with the transition, after maybe do a few reps of those, but then open up the focus a little bit and see a little bit more, and then still work on that transition. And that will help it come game time, make it a little bit easier for you.
Absolutely. Awesome, Chitty. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, awesome. All right, we're gonna head on to the topic that everyone gets real heated about and passionate about. P.S. Elena, thank you for the data. You know, use your resources too. Like, I think it's really cool in our game that we share and that people are willing to provide stuff. You know, Elena, she's got a job to do at Hit Tracks, but she's also really willing to help grow the game, right? So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for information. Okay. The next topic is obstruction. So this is, the last few questions, essentially, I'm just gonna kind of throw out to all, and feel free to kind of step up and say what you have to say. But what are our general thoughts on obstruction and how to best kind of coach the younger player with the rule? It's always debated, and it's always kind of interpreted differently, unfortunately. We all aren't umpires, we're catchers, so we're trying to do our best to make plays, but they see things differently sometimes. And so I think the question is, how do you set up for it maybe properly? How do you drill it? Like, where are some things you can do in your practices to maybe actually practice avoiding it? Because I think we can't just continue to do things the way that maybe myself and Rafter, at least, probably Chitty and Sash, that we were all taught to do it. You know, we were pretty dang aggressive with what we were doing because that's how we were taught. So now that the game has evolved and we're trying to protect people a little bit more, what should we be looking for to teach?
I can go. I have a video. There's one play in particular that I just wanted to focus on. So I think the biggest play to me that causes trouble is the ball up the line. Like, that is the play that everyone's like, I don't know how to do this. So I think in this situation, there's two different ways to do it. I think mentality wise, think of it as a first baseman. You would never like tell a first baseman if the throw is up the first base line, hey, just go onto the line. It's okay. You have like gear on. Don't worry about it. Just like go up the line and let the runner truck you. So in this like first one, how to handle this ball. So the bucket was there to just simulate, like, that's the spot that we're not gonna, like, this is the angle, like, we're not touching, like, that is the runner's lane. I'm not going past the white line. So all you do is you flip your feet. So I'm just gonna take my right foot, throw it to the ball, and then I can come back and tag the runner. So we're staying in front of the baseline. The other one, the second one, to kind of simplify it, is that you're going to like reverse your course and go behind the baseline. It's a little more risky because the runner's now going in front of you, but you just move your feet and that same ball, you're not going into the baseline. So again, I think putting something there to help kids identify that this is the area I'm not allowed to go, just like you would at first base. Vacate home plate. Like, you don't have to sit on home plate. Just like you don't tell a first baseman, like, just sit on the base and catch the ball. No, like, we'll vacate and we'll come back down and tag. So I think allowing them to move and be athletic and understand you can leave home plate. That's okay. Just know, however far you left it, you come back to it, and then develop from there and kind of just let them be athletes back there. But this is the one play, it gets me every time, and everyone doesn't seem to have kind of an answer on how to do it. But this is what I do in terms of that ball that's going up the line. There are some other techniques I use, but I'll let you guys kind of jump in. But this is the one play that gets me every time that I had to kind of talk on at least a little bit.
I think Coach Ford did this my senior year, and it was fun, and I think it'd be a good way to bring it in. She would stand kind of on the where the dirt meets the grass and kind of position herself in different areas and hit balls to simulate, throws from the outfield. And then she incorporated it with a yoga ball, and somebody would be standing kind of in the area and throwing the ball into that zone, and what you have to do to catch the ball and make the tag. I think that, this rule, that's a fun way to incorporate that. But I think that this rule, it's kind of just the discretion of the umpire and the timing of the throw and the runner. My sister plays at U of A and was in a pretty nasty collision right before heading into pack play, and just she was in the right position, just the timing, and the runner didn't slide. So I think that you could do also everything correctly and position yourself to a point where you're in the right and still something happens. So just understanding that, you could be doing everything correctly, but still this could come about. And I think that, the obstruction rule, I think, protects the runner a little bit more obviously than the catcher. And it's unfortunate because the runner is coming at full force and you're kind of stagnant. So I think that, it's kind of up for the discretion, but you could also be doing everything correctly, like move around the plate and something still come about. So just kind of having that grace in this call.
Absolutely. And if I had to add one thing, I think that what Rafter said with being an athlete, I think that is probably some of the best advice I've ever gotten as being a catcher and catching balls coming into home plate, is just be an athlete. And, like, you're a first baseman, like what she was saying. And I think that really helped me get to a lot more balls and be more agile back there to be able to make plays that maybe you wouldn't if you were just standing there.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, I think sometimes at the end of the day, we just undercoach the position. We kind of just let catchers be, right? And it's as simple as what you're saying. Coach Ford took you out that was probably a pretty short drill. It didn't take that much time, right?
Mm.
But you know, you didn't do it till your senior year of college.
Yeah.
I mean, like, why aren't we doing these things maybe at a younger level? So that we're a little more prepared when you're coming to college. One thing we accidentally ran into this year, we do that all the time. I fungo balls into the girls to home plate. And they were just going through reps and somebody ended up with a ball in their bare hand. And what was funny is they ended up keeping it and it helped them focus on being able to catch with one hand and
Yeah.
being able to pick the ball and make tags, right? And obviously, ideal world, we're going to cover that up and be really, really sure, you know, but we have to be comfortable with one hand. We have to be. We have to be athletic. We can't be trying to block everything.
Yep.
You'll see the best of the best are making fantastic plays with their hands, making a backhand, making a forehand, and making a tag, right? So maybe just paying attention to that more. Again, it goes back to glove work, right? Utilizing those opportunities to get better with our gloves as catchers.
Absolutely.
All right. Wow, I'm talking too much. I'm just supposed to ask questions. Sorry, guys. You know, we're getting a lot of questions from the crowd about like, when did you start catching? And a lot about like, how are your relationships with pitchers? What do you do with that? You know, so that's kind of leads into this one. And so it's kind of from the crowd, kind of from us, but you know, how do you manage pitchers? Pitchers, everybody loves them. They're different, right? And every single one of them on their own is different. And you guys, you three are facing all sorts in your groups and your teams that you're a part of. So what are some of your tips and tricks to handling pitchers? And what are those conversations like? You know, Chitty talked about this a little bit yesterday about how she's really dove, I don't know. She's been diving into having in-depth conversations with her pitchers, you know, and they're preparing to go fight for a medal, right? Like, it's important, you know, it's important to be on the same page. So what are the tips and tricks that you have in communicating with pitchers?
Yeah, that's been honestly like something that has been huge for me, especially in this last year. Before, like, I always thought that like, if the pitcher wants something, just tell me. Like, I don't get what the big deal is, you know? So like, sometimes I would just expect them to tell me what they're looking for, and then I soon realized that sometimes they're wanting something from me, and it's like, well, wait a second, like, I thought you know what you're doing, you know? So I think that has been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is just communicating with them and building a relationship with them as a human, right? Like, as a person, like, what are you looking for? Like, what you know motivates you? Or when you're in your bullpen, like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what's your main? Because they usually 9 times out of 10 have a like, you know, I'm coming in today and I'm working on this, this, and this because I want to be better at this, this, and this. And so it's just like, you know, understanding that, and then even outside of softball, just kind of, you know, communicating with them and getting to know their personality. Like, you know, what are you like, you know, what makes you tick, what, you know, do you like in-depth conversation with it? Are you more like, you're just depending on me with different things, or do you want my point of view? And so I've been learning a lot with that. And one thing that I felt like was just, wow, like, I'm so glad that we had built that relationship was an example of on tour this year. You know, I made it a point with myself, like, to be a better catcher, I need to get to know these pitchers better. Like, and I really wanted to get to know them as people. And so I started, you know, getting closer with them and creating more conversation just to kind of get to know them. And because I did that, there was a situation in a scrimmage that, you know, going in, I thought to myself, I need to go talk to her and see what her approach is in this situation, because we were doing situational play. Because in my mind, I was like, oh, we'll just go get outs. But in her mind, she was doing it based on situation. And I knew that I needed to go have a conversation with her, but I tried to, like, you know what, I'm going to do this myself. I think I know what she wants, and I'm just going to go for it. Fail, right? But because I failed and because we were not on the same page, then what ended up happening, because I built a relationship with her after practice, we both cooled down, and you know, we were able to sit down and have a conversation about what that she was maybe looking for in that situation, and then she wanted to know my side of what I was thinking in those situations. So it was like, we cleared it all out, and it was like, wow, like, I learned so much from that conversation, and now we can build off that. And we won't have, you know, hopefully we won't have those issues come game time. But, you know, if you just tried playing a guessing game and thinking that you know your pitcher, but you really don't, it's just going to be miserable for both parties. So that's, something that I've found so much value in these last few years of me playing versus, me trying to guess in years prior.
That's awesome, Chitty. I mean, you guys can answer, but that was pretty dang good. Just saying.
Awesome.
I'll let you guys continue on this, but this is a question from the audience. What do you say to a pitcher after they've given up a home run? So I mean that leads to the conversation. Everybody's different, right? How do you
Everyone's
guys
different.
handle those types of situations?
Well, as a catcher, you wear multiple hats. You're like a therapist, you're everything. Like you really do have to talk to each pitcher differently. And I think that,
Yes.
with a couple of our pitchers, you have to kind of beat around the bush of certain situations. And with other ones, and this is something that I've learned, it's like, it's okay to tell them, like, especially it depends on the pitcher, but like Danielle O'Toole, like she likes being told things directly. And that was really hard for me because it was my second summer catching her. And so it was hard for me to just go up to her and say, hey, she wanted me to tell her that was flat or that was down the middle. And that was really hard for me to just get over. I don't want to tell her that, but that's what helped. And that's how her brain works. And
your pitch was awful.
Like, and that's not my personality at all. I'm like, yeah, it's great. Next week, she's like, Sashel, where was it? And I was like, okay. So I think it's definitely knowing the pitcher and I kind of reading the question. I also think that, it's very coach driven generation. Even, I'm speaking for Mexico, it's very coach driven, but I think that when you're in the game, you see the ball and you see the movement really well from the pitcher. You know what's working and what is not. And so I think that having that, relationship and having that, trust in one another to be talking through and kind of not go against your coach, but also understand that you have a perfect view of what's happening in front of you and kind of trusting what you guys have and your ability, if you're calling the pitches, to throw that correct pitch with what's working.
Awesome.
Yeah, the only thing I would add from that is just, I think if I could make a rule in young kids softball, it's that like you would have to call the game as a catcher. Like I don't get why we're at like 9U with these bans. Like I understand the NCAA. Like I realize how much money is involved in NCAA and how much value there is to a win. Like when you're talking coaches, families, contracts, but I've never seen like money exchanged at a 12U field on the 17th game of a Sunday. Like that's not the time where we need to be worried about like people's families. So I think just if you're a catcher, like really push to call the game, or if that's not going to happen, like pay attention to what's happening because it's really hard as you get to the next level to transition if you're just a backstop. Because at the end of the day, if you're just looking at your wristband, putting down a signal, all you are is like, they might as well put a screen back there because you're not doing anything. You're just catching the ball and throwing it back. So if there's one thing I could change, it'd be that. But if it can't, like push yourself to pay attention and understand why things are happening in those situations. And if you are a coach on this, like let your kids call the game. That is the best way to learn why you do certain things. The best way to learn why you don't throw a pitch is to have a home run hit off of it and then have the conversation of why'd you throw that? Oh, probably not a good thing to throw. And then guess what? Next time you won't do it. So
yeah. That is exactly what you just said right there. That's the key, is letting them do it, letting them fail, and just having a conversation. Like, don't get mad at them because they called a certain pitch, because then that makes me afraid to call pitches now. So like build them up. It is like build them up and teach them the way that you're looking for, the way that, because the way I call pitches is so different than Sashel, it's so different than Rafter, and that's okay, as long as we get the job done. So there's no right way or wrong way. So don't scar a kid at such a young age.
But Chitty, I think that's why it's so important with what you said about building that relationship with the pitcher outside of the field. Because then if you have that relationship initiated and started, then when you do have that hard conversation with them, it's not like, oh, why are you being mean to me? No, it's like, hey, we're trying to be a collective battery, and to be that and to be great, we need to have those hard conversations. Yeah. And so I think that point was spot on.
I think it's hard for young coaches coaching at the younger level to let them fail. And that happens to us too. We don't want them to fail. But especially at that younger level, you kind of have to let them make some mistakes so that you can correct it. And if we're kind of just forcing them, force feeding them, then they lose that learning in the game. And unfortunately, those of us that are coaching at the collegiate level, we have to deal with that. We're teaching so much that unfortunately we probably shouldn't have to, but we do, you know. So I think that those points are really, really important. So another question from the crowd here is to all three, and then we'll finish with one more question, I think, after that. Is what can you attribute the longevity of your careers to? I mean, Rafter, how old are you? I know we're not supposed to ask age. I know you're younger than me.
No, I think I'm 34 this year. This summer I'll turn 34.
34 this year. So yeah, she's had some years under her belt. Again, in softball years, that means you're like, you know, 200 by now, you know.
Japan, the 2 years in Japan was like 10 years of softball life.
That is so true.
That's definitely true. So yeah, what from a health standpoint, you know, what have you done? And maybe quick over the last couple of years now that you guys are Olympians, you're preparing, like what have you done a little bit differently to take care of yourselves?
Stretch.
Yeah, stretch. I think I somehow ran into some good people, like right at a really, I like to call it like a vulnerable age in terms of like 24, 25. A few people that just kind of made me rethink why I do things and how I do things. And I do think that, and then I got to go over to Japan, like I've kind of said, and you have all the time in the world to practice all these things they just talked to you about. I don't think not many softball players have that opportunity. You start to figure it out, and then it's like, it's time to retire because there's not many places to play after that. But I think you learn kind of shortcuts along the way. And I think being able to learn how to sequence my body and understand how my body's working and why was huge. Because I mean, I used to be able to throw, like I couldn't throw, my elbow would be sore within 10 throws. And now I can go out not having thrown and be comfortable to throw down to second pretty full go without ever warming up, just because I kind of know how my body works. But I do think that you learn you get stronger and you learn how to take care of your body a little better. And I think as you get older, Chitty can probably speak, but I think you start prioritizing taking care of your body a lot better. Yeah. And that becomes the most important thing, because I know that the softball skills we stopped doing as much, or maybe don't practice as much, but we're in the weight room and doing cardio double what we probably used to or needed to as a kid, because you just kind of change in that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, going off what you said too, like, you know, meeting the right people at the right time was huge for me. And it's being aware of your body 100%. Like, I am so in tune with my body and what it needs. Like, I prioritize sleep. You know, I usually get at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep so that I'm fully recovered. And, you know, the timing of, you know, my nutrition is a huge piece, you know, to my day. And, you know, if I'm not getting good sleep, why am I not getting good sleep? You know, like I'm dissecting, you know, different things to kind of help my body recover. And again, I know what works for me. So I know how I need to get my body ready to be at its best. And, you know, you definitely learn that over the years. And like what Rafter was saying, like you prioritize, you know, what's important, because you want to go out on that field and you want to feel good. And, you know, I wish I would have done that way back when, because I'd be feeling on top of the world, you know, but yeah.
That was awesome.
Gosh, you're pretty young. What are you doing these days?
You know, stretching. No, I'm just kidding. That's something that I have to be better about. I mean, I would talk to Chitty when she was at the qualifier event, and she's like, "Have you rolled out on a lacrosse ball?" I'm like, "No," and she's like, "Well, you should do that." So I think it's also like realizing that even though the things that you don't feel great, they're going to make you feel better, and kind of like you guys said it perfectly, but just prioritizing what's important. And I've also been more conscious of my sleep patterns and getting to bed at the same time. And I know that in this time of uncertainty, it's super easy to, you know, stay up and Netflix all night, but definitely like putting that stuff away and making sure that we're still, you know, using the sleep and this time to sleep. And also I think that's something like doing things that are more low impact, like biking. I feel like, you know, yoga and just kind of challenging my body in a different way and trying new things has been really big and beneficial for me.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I mean, I think again, it's funny. It's the answers that we all probably should know and do is sleep, right? Nutrition, you know, those simple elementary answers. And they definitely will prove to give you guys some length to your career. I think we've learned a little bit in catching some ways to take care of your body in how you perform as a catcher too, and Rafter's probably the only one I've talked with about this stuff in the past very often with, but how you squat, she mentioned it at the very beginning, not necessarily putting all the pressure down through your toes and your knees, actually squatting down through your hips properly. I mean, that's going to put life back into your body. It's amazing the wear and tear that you can put on your knees, or that you can actually, take away from your knees, because again, if you didn't know it, right, we've trained it improperly for years, and now that we know some things, let's do it correctly. I think there's misconception. A question came up in here too, is when you're squatting, you're not going to just stay on your heels. It's not like we're like sitting back, right? We squat down through our heels, but our balance is still in our catcher posture, kind of 45-degree angle with our chest. So we're still forward and we're still ready to attack. You look at those Olympic lifters, right? Like, that's a good position to explode from. So don't let it be confused with something where you're getting lazy or getting where you get stuck, okay, on your heels. But the idea of being on your toes, the balls of your feet, we're going to be a little more balanced on our feet than that, okay? The other thing I would say is how we block, and we're not going to get too much into this probably, but the blocking where you're essentially replacing your feet all the time and you're catching air. And obviously those that are the best at that skill, I learned that skill at a young age, right? Blocking where I replaced my feet with my knees. I did it over and over and over and over. And even doing it pretty well where I wasn't, up and down, still puts a lot of wear and tear on your knees, right? And if we can learn how to block where we're not necessarily going up and down so much, but we're driving our knees forward. And unfortunately, I don't have any video of that right this second. I don't think, Elena, unless there's anything you have in your bag of tricks, but I have some great video from when I was at Utah, some players that were really good at it. And you want to think about essentially like sliding on your shin guards a little bit forward, driving forward a little bit, taking your belly button to the ball and attacking the ball with your body as if it was a short hop, and your body is the glove. And in that sense, you can preserve those knees. You can preserve the pounding of knees up and down, up and down, up and down. So little things there. And again, those are more detailed things that you have to teach. But just being aware that, we don't need to crush catchers. A lot of times when we block with light flights out of the pitching machine so that, you're not just taking one off the wrist, but you're still getting the speed of the game, right? We learned from Greeny, throw shin guards, kids shin guards on the forearms, right? Soccer shin guards, right? And you slip them over so that you got that hard surface on the shin guard, so that when they're learning, they're not just getting beat up. We have to take care of these kids, and not just treat them like backstops, like Rafter was talking about. Otherwise, let's put a net back there. That was funny. Okay. All right. A couple more. I mean, I don't necessarily have anywhere to be other than my husband's probably.
I think I have somewhere to be. I think it was like June 15th, the quarantine ends. Then I'm good till then.
I say next fall we have to have our gear on and we have to show.
Yeah, we should demo a little bit.
Yeah. We all have some sweet gear these days. It's pretty awesome. Okay. Common question from these guys too is what do you guys do to train? Like, what are kind of your workout regimens? And the question really that I have is right now during this, this time, it's probably been a good time for some of you three for you guys to rest a little bit. But as you start to ramp back up and get going, obviously, I know we have some workers in the bunch. So, if and when you get going again, what are some things that you're doing? I know for you guys, you're probably maintaining your body a lot more than anything else. But when you do get the chance to work on your skills, what are you doing?
I think one of my favorite things to do is like kind of what Rafter was saying, like we don't like necessarily, not that we don't need to, like it's always great to continue to work on our skills. But I think that over the years, like I've gotten more creative and implementing like softball things within my workouts. So like, conditioning in the squat, right, is huge. So I'll like, talk to my trainer about it. And we do like conditioning type workouts, like in catching positions and different things like that. That way, I don't have to do it at the ball field. Like we just implement it in as like a cardio or different like strength workout type deal. So it's like kind of like catching within my workout type. And so that's a lot of things that I like to do that I enjoy because it keeps it exciting for me and I enjoy it. So.
Yeah, I think a few things kind of what you said, like working on your stance and your movements, like you could go through a block and get up and not like that's a movement that you're going to have to do and you don't need a ball, but we can start training the movements, how we're going to move in a squat, how we're going out for bunts. Those are all things you can do with not actually executing the throw or having space. Anything ball and glove I would recommend. So like you could go out with the tennis, find some infield drills on YouTube and just take any of the infield drills and like do them from a crouch, or kind of just do the infield drills themselves and just work on like getting the ball out of your mitt. And I've been talking with a few teams. I think the probably best thing you could do is like watch softball right now. You can go onto YouTube and type in NCAA softball and there'll be 300 games that pop up. So actually go on and watch, not as a fan, but like consume the game. Like, what is this pitcher throwing? Why did they do this? How did they set up pitchers? Like, take 30 minutes, maybe 3 times a week, and you'll get through a game. But you could have 2 like high-level softball teams. That'd be perfect to do. Get through 5 games this summer of just really high level, but not watching it, like consuming it and being detailed about watching your position and what they're doing.
That's awesome. I think also, I mean, I keep referring to Coach Ford because she's awesome, but she also like some days where she didn't want me to do a super heavy load with bullpens or whatnot, she would just put me in front of a wall and she'd get lacrosse balls, different color lacrosse balls or tennis balls, and she'd be behind me throwing them against the wall and just having my brain kind of register, like if it's above the tape or the line that you put up there, if it's above, we're going to frame, below, we're going to pick. So just doing little things that gets your brain working, not necessarily maybe super heavy load with body, but getting your brain in that game-like situation, just to keep it going. Because, you know, once you, see live pitching in a while, it's going to take a little transition time to kind of get those muscles working again. So I think that was something that I really like and I still use in my game.
Awesome. You guys nailed it. Okay. A couple more questions from the question and answer that have been common is the mental side of it. So somebody said, how do you mentally prepare? Somebody just said how, what advice can you give on the mental game? And I think we all know this, like it's probably the most important piece really when it boils down to it, and maybe just like each of you give your most important like mental preparation thought, or maybe an in-game mental thing for you that's really helped you. And let's talk from the catching side of it, not obviously the hitting side, because we know that's the most mental thing in the world.
I'll start. I think that's something I've really learned and gained in my game is the defense. When you're catching, you can control that 150% of the time. Like I take pride and joy in my defense. And I think that, obviously that comes with like training a lot and confidence, but I really think that, I could try to take the hitting aspect out of it, because when I'm on the field, I need to be there for my team and for my pitcher. And so I really think that like catching is kind of like my baby. I take a lot of pride in it, and that's something that I spend a lot of my energy on. And so just something during game is like when I'm not, maybe hitting the way I want to, that's the energy that I'm putting into my catching is what I'm helping my team with. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but I think that like catching is something that you can control at all times. And I think that has really helped elevate my defense in the past couple of years. It's like taking pride in what you're doing and being present in the moment when you're catching, because you do have a lot to think about. But I think when you slow the game down and I think it helps a lot. Did that answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it on the head. Slow the game down, right? Separation from your hitting is huge. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do. So yeah, I hit on a couple of those things that you got to train. You got to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, and especially when I coach, I think the biggest thing I see is you have to like practice the skill enough to be comfortable, because there's so much going on. Like people don't realize being a catcher, you're like the umpire, the coach is yelling at you from the dugout. You're trying to get a sign. The pitcher's frustrated. You're trying to look at the hitter. There's all this stuff going on. If you're trying to think about how to catch a curveball, like you're in trouble. Like all those skills have to just be like we talk, just like cruise control. Like when I'm in the game, like I need to know that these skills they're just going to happen. Because if I'm thinking about how to catch a curveball, or I don't want to mess this up, nothing else is coming in. If I'm worried about making a block or making a pick or shoot, I got the rise ball and I don't know if I can catch this. Like that's the only thing that you're going to be thinking of. You're not taking in information of where the runner is and what the situation is and where my defense is and do I have the bunt, or is our defense called? Like there's a lot of things going on. So the more automatic you can make your skill set stuff, which comes with work off the field, like that's the purpose of working on those skills, is to make it automatic so it just flows and then we can like see the field, cruise control, taking information.
Good.
That was a great point. You nailed that one. It's so true, because I'm just like sitting here thinking about it, how overwhelming it can be back there when you're trying to think about the game, but then you have all these other things, and that's like kind of like what I was going to go off of, is that like when I'm catching, like I'm just like laser focused, because I'm so like not worried about, but just like, who's coming up to bat, like, oh, Raptors in the hole, like, okay, how am I going to set up these 2 hitters coming up next, like I have, this hitter coming up. So, just trying to, they always say 1 pitch at a time, but, as a catcher, sometimes you have to think a couple pitches ahead, but just trying not to get overwhelmed with everything, I think is the biggest thing I try to do as a catcher. And when I like am catching and then I go to the dugout, like I need to debrief for a second, like what did I just do? And, prepare myself for that next inning. So I think that's kind of, the biggest thing for me, the mental side of, using the dugout time to kind of like get it back together. How am I going to prepare for that next inning, and then get back there and get after it again?
I think if you train a lot of the skills and then you just go into the game and just react and let the game happen and play the game that you know how to play, it gives off that confidence to your team, and the team is going to thrive off that. And I think that is something that, a lot of catchers that I've seen kind of sometimes lack, that they're just kind of so consumed and so worried about that they don't just let everything happen. And I think that confidence is huge. They're going to feed off of that. Pitchers will, and so will the defense.
Yeah. Raph, you have something? You good? Okay, I was just gonna add, those are fantastic thoughts, all of you guys. I think the last thing I would say is that the catching position is a very selfless position. And I think sometimes you have to remove yourself from your own struggles, right? And remember, like, your job is essentially to take care of the pitcher first, right? Take care of your team and do your job first, so that they have that confidence in you, So, and I think that was super hard for me to learn, is that when I struggled, I'd wear it, right? And I had to get over that. You have to to kind of persevere a little bit more, because everybody's looking at you and the pitcher all the darn time, right? The rest of the field has their eyes on you as the catcher. And so we have to show that presence. I think this conversation has been fantastic. I know, as much as we could go on and on and on, and maybe we can revisit. Like I said, I'd love to throw some drills together that we can somehow put out for you guys, and maybe we start a little some sort of social media page for you guys to throw some drills together, because I think there's plenty to learn from, but hard to put together in just an hour here via technology. But the other thing I would say is, I know for me, and these ladies, you can probably hear from them as well, but for me, if you would like to ask more questions, like Twitter, I'm pretty, like, anybody can find me. So find me on there and shoot me an instant message, and I'll try to answer your question. I don't really do that with Instagram and Facebook, just FYI. I kind of keep those more as my personal things, but Twitter, I keep a lot of sports stuff out there. So find me on there if you have any questions for me. I know these guys are all on Twitter as well, Elena and HitTracks. These guys are all out there via social media. If not, Google the heck out of them, find an email address, right? Like, you want information, find somebody that can provide it for you. You want to learn, like, go to the source, and there's so much out there, and we all have a little bit of time on our hands. So my advice would be to seek as much as you can right now, and utilize those resources. So if you three, or Elena, if you guys have anything else to add, again, I'm super grateful. I learned a ton tonight. I love it.
I learned a lot tonight. I'm pumped.
It's so awesome to see, we're talking about 3 women at the peak of our game. that are preparing and persevering through a little bit right now. You know, you thought you were playing in 2 months, and you know, that's not the case, but top of their game, and they're still learning, and now they got a full year to learn some more. So pretty cool as competitors, you guys actually sharing information with one another. And lastly, Elena, with the information from the data side of things is so phenomenal right now in our world. So utilizing the technology is something that I think we can all get better at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been awesome. And the more you go out, you guys are going out and playing, the more we're learning from watching you play. And I think Maggie said it best. You know, the whole community is trying to rally around how it can help people continue to learn and get better in this time. So I know I speak for myself, and pretty confident that I speak for the women on the screen that, you know, 100% reach out to us. If there's anything we can do, if you have any questions on the data side, please, you know, shoot me an email or shoot me a text. We're here. And Maggie, thanks so much for putting this conversation together. I mean, this was awesome.
Yeah. Hey, well, last question, actually. Somebody said, what's your favorite pregame meal? So, I mean, that's an easy one. Pregame meal? Postgame might be more appropriate. I don't know. Let's go with that. Favorite postgame meal? Anyone? Sash, my
whatever
girl.
they have in the thing, I will say probably that meal that made me the happiest last summer was we went to Waffle House after one game, and it was like probably the most delicious meal I've ever had.
You're all about
Breakfast at like 11:30 at night. So good. That's my most memorable meal from all last summer.
All right.
I don't get a lot of authentic Mexican food, but I mean, Chipotle is pretty good after post game. It's good in protein, it has all what you need. So I would go with Chipotle. It fills me up. I like that.
All right. Chitty?
Oh, man, I just love food. So honestly, like I could talk for an hour about it. So I don't know. Hannah Flippin and I have been roommates for a while, and we've come up with some good stuff after some games.
Whatever. Hannah Flippin is so picky, and that punk is their ass.
Oh, we're getting. She showed me a picture today with vegetables on her plate. So
she's also reading books these days, guys. So something's moving in the water. Even though she's like a straight A student, I don't know how that happened. All right, sorry. We could, obviously we could get talking even more about things that aren't quite as important as catching, but
thank you for putting all this on. We appreciate it.
Elena, we're gonna throw this on some YouTube, maybe
Yeah, we'll have this on YouTube, and so that'll be on our page. And if you have any questions or want any specific clips, we're happy to cut it up and send it to you, and we'll definitely be putting it on social medias and stuff like that too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Tthank you.
Guys,
all right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Have a great night.
All right.
Bye.
Whoa.